Good morning. In this video, we are going to discuss about the physiology of cerebellum. Live like cerebellum. வாழ்ந்த cerebellum மாதிரி தான் வாழணும். ஏன்டா cerebellum வந்து constantly updated. It collect the information always from muscle, tendon, joints. It correct the positions according to the information. So we have to update it every day. So live like cerebellum. Cerebellum is important for the maintain the balance and equilibrium and coordination of the movements, maintain the tone of the muscle. These are the three important functions. The weight of the cerebellum is 10% of the cerebral cortex. It receives the sensory input from the different pathway and it control the movements. So correct the errors and do the accurate movements. Cerebellum is located in the posterior cranial fossa. This is the cerebellum. It located between the midbrain pons medulla. Cerebellum is attached to the brainstem by three cerebellar peduncles: superior cerebellar peduncle, middle cerebellar peduncle, inferior cerebellar peduncle. Anatomically, cerebellum is divided into the anterior lobe, this is posterior lobe, and flocculonodular lobe. Functionally, the flocculonodular lobe is called as the vestibulocerebellum. Vermis and paravermis, this region is called as the spinocerebellum. This is called as the spinocerebellum. This part is called as the cerebrocerebellum. The vestibulocerebellum is important for the balance. Spinocerebellum is important for the maintain the tone of the muscles. Cerebrocerebellum is important for the coordination. Phylogenetically, the vestibulocerebellum is the oldest part, that is called as the archicerebellum. Spinocerebellum is called as the paleocerebellum. So cerebrocerebellum is the neocerebellum. It is the phylogenetically newer cerebellum. So old one is the archicerebellum, new one is the neocerebellum, intermediate is the paleocerebellum. Pollia is the outer surface of the cerebellum. It is made up of tightly packed leaf-like horizontal fold. It makes the cerebellar surface. Outer cerebellar cortex and deep cerebellar nuclei made up of gray matter. Inner area is made up of white matter. So deep cerebellar nuclei, outer cerebellar cortex made up of gray matter, inner cerebellar area made up of white matter. Layers of cerebellar cortex. Outer molecular layer, it contains stellate cell. So this is the stellate cell and vascular cells. So outer layer contains the stellate cell and vascular cells. These inhibit the Purkinje cells, stellate cell and vascular cells. Inhibit the Purkinje cells through neurotransmitter GABA. Middle layer contains the largest Purkinje cell. This is the Purkinje cell. So it inhibits the deep cerebellar nuclei through GABA. Granular cell layer, it's on the inner granular cell layer. So this is the granule cells and Golgi cells. granule cells stimulate the Golgi cells. Golgi cells inhibit the granular cells. So outer molecular layer contains stellate cells and Wesker cells. Middle layer contains the Purkinje cells. Inner layer contains the granule cells and Golgi cells. Cerebellar internal connections. இந்த படத்தின் மூலம் செரிபெல்லார் இன்டர்னல் கனெக்ஷன்ஸை ஈஸியாக எக்ஸ்பிளைன் பண்ணலாம். செரிபெல்லத்துக்குள்ள வர இன்புட்ஸ் மீன்ஸ் இன்ஃபர்மேஷன்ஸ் அபவுட் த மூவ்மெண்ட் ஃப்ரம் த கார்டெக்ஸ் ஸ்பைனல் கார்டு எல்லாம் வந்து ரெண்டு வழியாக போகலாம். ஒன்று வந்து கிளைம்பிங் ஃபைபர்ஸ், இன்னது வந்து மோசி ஃபைபர்ஸ். கிளைம்பிங் ஃபைபர்ஸ்க்கு இன்ஃபர்மேஷன் எல்லாம் த்ரூ இன்ஃபீரியர் ஆலிவரி நியூக்ளியஸ் வழியாக மட்டும்தான் கிடைக்கும். மோசி ஃபைபருக்கு மற்ற எல்லா சென்சரி பாத்வே வழியாக கிடைக்கும். கிளைம்பிங் ஃபைபர்ஸ் வந்து Purkinje cell stimulate பண்ணது through aspartate. On the way to the Purkinje cell, it is also stimulate the deep cerebellar nuclei. Deep cerebellar nucleiங்கிறது tendate nucleus, globus nucleus, emboliform nucleus, and fastigial nucleus. Other sensory pathways carry the information through Mosey fiber, forms the glomeruli. It stimulates the cranial cells through glutamate. On the way to the cranial cells, Mosey fiber also stimulate the deep cerebellar nuclei through glutamate. This cranial cells forms the parallel fibers that stimulate the Purkinje cell, basket cell, stellate cell, and Golgi cells. Okay. So the Golgi cell also inhibit the cranial cells. Okay. So cranial cells through parallel fibers stimulate the Purkinje cell. Purkinje cell inhibit the deep cerebellar nuclei. Parallel fibers also stimulate the stellate cell and basket cell. Both the stellate basket cell inhibit the Purkinje cells. So finally, Purkinje cell inhibit the deep cerebellar nuclei through the inhibitor neurotransmitter GABA. This internal circuit is important for the neural sharpening, for carry out the smooth coordinated movement and balance, equilibrium, maintain the tone of the muscles. So this circuit is very important for neural sharpening. Deep cerebellar nuclei. So this is a nuclei fastigiae and nucleus globusus, nucleus emboliformis, nucleus tendatus. These are made up of gray matter. Deep cerebellar nuclei made up of gray matter. Nuclei fastigiae, globus, emboliformis. These are connected through the spinocerebellum. Spinocerebellum is important for the control the muscle tone of the muscle. And tendate nucleus is connected through the corticocerebellum. It is important for the coordination of the movements. Vestibulocerebellum. Phylogenetically oldest, so it is called as the archicerebellum. Floccular nodular lobe is called as the vestibulocerebellum. It is important for the maintenance of the posture and equilibrium. Vestibulocerebellum input is collect the information from the vestibular nucleus to the cerebellum through Mosey fibers. The output, so the corrective impulses passing through the fastigial nucleus to the vestibular nucleus to vestibulospinal tracts. Through medial longitudinal fasciculus, it controls the third, fourth, sixth cranial nerves. It is important for the extraocular muscle movements. The eyeball movement is controlled by the third, fourth, sixth cranial nerves. It is connected through the medial longitudinal fasciculus. Spinocerebellum or paleocerebellum developmentally next to the archicerebellum. Vermis controls the axial and proximal limb muscles. Vermis, paravermis, combinedly called as the spinocerebellum. It receives a proprioceptive impulse from the muscle. It is important for the regulate the muscle tone and stretch reflexes. The spinocerebellum inputs come from the dorsal spinocerebellar tracts and craniocerebellar tracts from the upper limb. It enters into the inferior cerebellar peduncle through mossy fiber to the cerebellum. Ventral spinocerebellar tract, this carries the information from the lower limb. So it makes a double crossing inside the cerebellum. So first crossing at the level of the spinal cord and second crossing occur at the level of the cerebellum. It enters through the superior cerebellar peduncle, ventral spinocerebellar tract. Spinocerebellum outputs. It is starting from the globus nucleus, emboliform nucleus, through cerebello-thalamo-cortical pathway, and rubrospinal pathway from the cerebellum to the red nucleus, rubrospinal pathway and reticulospinal pathway. It is important for the regulate the muscle tone and stretch reflexes. Cerebrocerebellum or neocerebellum. It is recently developed. Phylogenetically recent part is the neocerebellum. It is important for the coordination of the movements and the timing of the movement. It is important for the error correction in the movement. Corticocerebellar inputs. The cerebellum receives the input from the cortex and through pons it enters into the middle cerebellar peduncle and reaches the cerebellum. Cortico-pondocerebellar pathway inputs. Input through the mossy fibers. Corticocerebellum output from the deep cerebellar nuclei, that is the tendate nucleus, through superior cerebellar peduncle, reaches through thalamus to cortex. Cerebello-thalamo-cortical pathway. It is important for the coordination of the movements. Functions of cerebellum. Cerebellum controls the ipsilateral motor activity, but cerebral cortex control the contralateral motor activity. This is the difference between the cerebellum and cerebral cortex. Cerebellum is ipsilateral motor, control ipsilateral motor activity. Cerebrum contralateral. The main functions are balance and equilibrium done by the vestibulocerebellum. Smoothing and coordination of the movement controlled by the cerebrocerebellum. Muscle tone controlled by the spinocerebellum. Damping function of the cerebellum is the cerebellum prevent the overshooting, oscillation, instability in the voluntary movement. This is a damping function of the cerebellum. Cerebellar dysfunction. Ataxia is the loss of coordination of the movements. Dysmetria and fast pointing. Movement fails to reach the target point. Overshoot beyond the target point, that is pause pointing. It is due to the loss of dampening function of the cerebellum. So dampening function is prevent to overshooting the movement, prevent the ability to prevent the overshooting movement is the dampening function, is the main function of the cerebellum. So dysmetria, pause pointing due to the loss of dampening function of cerebellum. Decomposition of movements is the movement is carried out in stepwise manner, one joint at a time, due to the failure of smooth progression of the movement. Adiadokinesia is the inability to carry out rapid, alternate pronation and supination of the movement. Intentional tremor appear while performing the specific voluntary activity due to the failure of the dampening function. Dampening function is ability to prevent the oscillation during the voluntary movements. So intentional tremor appear while performing specific voluntary activity. Dysarthria is the difficulty in speech due to the lack of coordination of the muscles of articulation. Nystagmus is the to and fro movement of the eyeball. Rebound phenomenon, inability to control the movements when the resistance is suddenly removed, failure to break the movements. Okay. So when we are giving the resistance suddenly removed, we cannot break the movement. That is the rebound phenomenon. Hypotonia occur due to the disturbed excitatory cerebellar signal, a decreased muscle spindle sensitivity, and affect the cerebello-thalamo-cortical loop. So due to the hypotonia, the muscle is flappy. Pendular knee jerk is due to the hypotonia and affect the damping function of the cerebellum. Defective posture is due to the hypotonia. Loss of equilibrium, tendency to fall. If there is lesion in the flocculo-nodular lobe, we can see the loss of equilibrium. Staggering and reeling gait with wide feet seen in the defective equilibrium occur in the cerebellar lesion. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, press the like button, share your friends. Those who are not subscribed this channel, please subscribe. These videos briefly discuss the physiology topics. You must read the physiology textbooks. Thank you once again.